Hi, this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the Mesh Tsunami podcast. This week, we are offering 3 conversations from episode 14. Our episode remembering Stephen Harrison with Naim Alkhouri, Manal Abdelmalek, Jörn Schattenberg, and Louise Campbell. Plus, from the vault, the interview Louise and I conducted with Stephen as part of our 2022 wrap-up series. Unlike our usual introductions, this week I will mention the specific question the panelists answered about Stephen, and then simply invite you to listen to the interview to hear our answers. For this final conversation, I asked panelists to share their favorite Harrisonisms. Some of the answers echo what we heard last week, but Manal Abdelmalek in particular was a source of an entirely different kind of comment than what the rest of us have offered. Stephen Harrison was one of the most unique individuals I've ever had the pleasure to know and work with. These conversations touch on a small sample of what made Stephen Stephen. So just sit back, listen, learn, absorb, celebrate his life, and when you're done, check out and perhaps contribute to the memorial page on our LinkedIn discussion group.
This conversation from Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by Madrigal Pharmaceuticals in memory of our colleague Dr. Stephen Harrison.
The third thing I wanted to ask about, were Stephenisms, phrases, metaphors, ways of motivating people to do things that were unique to him. I mean, I will say first that on the 1-year anniversary of the podcast, Louise and our audio engineer and I compiled a list of them. And I can't find it right now, but it will wind up on the website as part of Stephen's memorial page once I do. But there had to be 20 or 25. And that was only in a year and an hour every week. So, he was amazing. Just amazing at that. Favorite Stephenisms, anybody?
Naim Alkhouri.
Yeah, I have a few. I can tell you 3. One I really liked in the context of clinical trials is the juice worth the squeeze? And we've had endless debates, on when to do the biopsy, how long is it going to take to achieve MASH resolution and fibrosis regression. And he was a believer that, if the juice worth the squeeze, that you should be aggressive and do it early on because you can demonstrate benefit and you don't have to wait 2 years. And it paid off for several pharmaceutical companies listening to him. The second one I really also liked, and I use it a lot, is the KISS concept. Keep it simple and stupid. And I think it's so important. And, the word stupid might be offensive, but really the message is simplicity. And when we go out and educate, you may know a lot about the indeterminate gray zone and PPV and MPV, but when you go educate primary care doctors, patient advocates, you have to keep it simple for them so they can actually take the message to their colleagues and really make an impact. And Stephen was a champion of this, and he had a very nice way simplify very complex concepts, and I use this a lot in my practice. And the last one that he started using recently is the concept that fail is the first attempt in learning. And I think he started using this after we had a few failed clinical trials in MASH, and he wanted to uplift all of us and tell us that good things will be coming in the future. This is how it works typically in drug development. You're going to have the failures before you have the successes, because unfortunately many drugs will not make it past phase 2, and then you're going to get your failures before you have your successes. But these are 3 of my favorite Harrison statements, I guess.
All beloved and frequently used on this podcast. I think if Louise goes 3 episodes without saying KISS at least once, something's dreadfully wrong somewhere in the cosmos. Manal, you have anything you want to add to that?
Manal Abdelmalek.
Yeah, I clearly remember the juice is worth the squeeze. But others that I remember is don't take yourself too seriously. Take the bull by the horns. Hindsight is 20/20. We're going to make mistakes. There will be failures. The worst ones possible are those that you don't grow and learn from. And so clearly that was words to live by. There will be mistakes, there will be failures, but the only way is to use those as a foundation for future success. Just that optimistic spirit he had. And the fact that really, while we all took Stephen seriously and held him in the highest esteem, he really had an element of humility about himself that resonated. And there were times he was able to be so worldly that he was just the common guy that you really just wanted to get to know, sit down and have a beer with, or shoot the breeze. And the one time that resonated in my mind when he epitomized that is when we were all at a a, Michelin restaurant and best restaurant in all of Paris. And they were bringing out all these delicacies that anybody could ever imagine, the escargot and the caviar and you name it. And Stephen turned to the waiter and asked for a hamburger and French fries. And I said, "You didn't." And he goes, "That's what I want. I can't eat this stuff. Just bring me a hamburger and French fries and make sure they're American French fries, not French." And I said, so he didn't take himself too seriously. And he was so comfortable being who he was, standing for what he believed, how he felt, and had an element of genuosity about him that made him so easy to like.
Yeah. Absolutely. Louise, Stevenisms?
Louise Campbell.
Well, I'm going to come up with one that was actually said at the funeral because I was watching online and it was one I didn't recall I'd ever heard before. And I think it was, what's the difference? He was asked what was the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom was knowing that a tomato was a fruit and knowledge was knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. That I hadn't heard before. And I thought, yeah, that is just so true. And it did make me giggle when it was said. I can't recall who said it, but there was a few of them came up in that, and it was a beautiful service.
But he truly did find joy in being a man of service to his community, to his country, to his family, to his friends. He led a life of service and found great joy in that. And indeed, there is great joy in giving, and I think he epitomized that.
I believe that's true. I'll do two Stevenisms, then I'll go back to your point a little bit, Manal. One, the best statement I've ever heard about defining why the liver matters is Stephen's line about the liver being the canary in the coal mine. Now, if you know the history of mining coal, then it's just a perfect metaphor, right? If the canary dies, there's too much bad gas in the coal mine. Well, the liver is the place that tells you that lots of things are about to go wrong, and that was the reason to take it so seriously. I thought that was fantastic. I also rarely heard him ask whether the juice is worth the squeeze without asking immediately after, is the hill worth the climb? And I wasn't sure. I didn't understand the difference between the two of them. I know how well they went together. I just didn't know why he did both. But sadly, this is one of the many things I never got to ask him. This isn't a story about Stephen. It's a story about Stephen's family and where he came from, but I think it really matters. To me, one of the most striking things of the week after Stephen passed was that his older brother, Ken, made a point of writing a response to every tribute he could find in social media. And Mike Patel, friend of the podcast, who was one of the most assiduous social media people I know in terms of how often he goes on and what he does, even he made a comment to me that, boy, that must have been a remarkable task. So when I saw Ken in the receiving line at the funeral last week, I told him how much, and Michael wasn't the only one who commented on it. He was just, to me, the most striking one. I told him how impressive and striking that was and how many people noticed it, to which his response was, it was what I could do. And I said, it struck me as what Stephen would have done. And he said, yes. And then he said, and this goes back to life of service, and religions may be different, but I'm going to take this in exactly its context. He said the greatest thing about Stephen is that everything he did was for God's glory. None of it was for himself. And I think that's right. And a fantastic definition of service. A remarkable guy. All right. In closing, does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Well, Stephen was a great businessman. He did so much for the field, but he was genuinely a true friend. He really cared about our families also. I mean, he would ask every time I see him about my personal life, my kids. You can also see the pride in his eyes when he talked about his kids. He loved them so much. And, Stephen was a wine connoisseur and he loved his wines. And I still remember one time we went to Paris for about 36 hours, the two of us, to do an advisory board. And we had a couple of hours and I'm like, okay, Stephen, I'm going to take you to Lafayette. And there's this nice wine store. I wanted to get a couple bottles. And he was so excited, like a kid in a candy shop. And then he's like, so what do you like to do for fun? If you want to spend some money. I'm like, I like to buy nice shoes, nice belts. So I took him with me at the Paris airport and we shopped for some belts. And then one of my favorite memories with Stephen is about, 2-3 months later, he was with his daughter and they went shopping and I needed to talk to him about something, but then he called me with his daughter and he's like, guess what we did? I'm like, what? He's like, we just had a Naim day. We just went shopping all day. He got his daughter all these nice things. things. And I thought that was just so genuine and nice, and it just, getting to know him on a personal human level. Again, I'm going to miss him dearly. I really hope that, we all stay in touch with his family and just continue to show them how much their dad meant to us and to everyone who was touched by his kindness and just spirit of collaboration and service.
And now, back to Roger.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please put them in the review section of the page from which you downloaded this conversation, or send an email to questions@surfingmash.com. If you would wish to write a comment on Stephen's memorial page, you can find it on the Surfing MASH website, and I believe the instructions will guide you through the process. Next week, we will cover the SLD Think Tank 2024 with co-hosts Jörn Schattenberg and Jeff Lazarus, and also participants Majid Deal and Mike Patel. Until then, stay safe, surf on, see you on the podcast. Celebrate life. Bye-bye now.
This conversation from Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by Madrigal Pharmaceuticals in memory of our colleague Dr. Stephen Harrison.